Good morning, everybody. It is my great privilege and pleasure to welcome you to Future Branches 2018. You know, this is a very exciting time, I think, to be in the industry of banking. As an observer, as an operator in this space, operator is the wrong word, somebody who studies this space and is very, very intrigued and very, very excited about the transitions that we're starting to take. I see the banking industry in the midst of some very meaningful, very substantial transitions. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about a couple of those with you today. The first one I would say starts off with it's kind of like a fine wine, if you will. It's taken kind of over a decade for it to mature as I start to look at some of the history of this. But of course I'm talking about mobile banking. This started many, many, many years ago, and it's been kind of slow growing. It's been exciting to see bank after bank, brand after brand, launch not only their first generation of their mobile experience with their customers, but also the second and third generations. And it's kind of exciting to see what's coming next. And when you look across the entire industry at large, almost everybody has got some form, some solution as it relates to a mobile app. I think the transition, though, for this year that's going to be interesting, and next year, and the next couple of years, will be how do you get the consumers to adopt these solutions? So the apps are available. The apps are, the center of the universe in some cases. Why pay dollars to take a deposit when you can only pay pennies? But the next challenge is going to be how do we get consumers to actually start using them? And ironically, I think the employee at the branch is going to be a very key part of that story. The second trend that I expect to get, and I see hopefully lots of answers and lots of insights over the next 3 days, really speaks to the branches themselves. What's going to happen with the branches? What kinds of changes we're going to see? As I look over the past several years, it seems like a lot of the major brands have kind of completed their initial phase of rationalization, if you will. We're at a point where, for most brands, or many brands, we have the right number of branches. The next question is, what's the right size of each individual branch? And kind of when I look at the industry at large, it seems like, to a large extent, there's a lot of interest in this hub and spoke mentality. Establish a flagship, something of meaningful magnitude that inspires confidence and strength and provides a wide portfolio of services, a beachhead, if you will, as your hub. And then have lots and lots of little spokes that basically give the convenience to the customer, give access, and give that kind of top-of-mind type experience. That as they're walking down the blocks, they're still thinking about your brand and thinking about the services and the solutions that you provide. The last trend that I'll talk about today, because I only get 10 minutes, is that I think is really going to be earth-shattering. Actually comes from overseas. And I'm talking about the European regulations, GDPR, General Data Protection regulations, as well as the PSD, Human Services Directive 2. Because it's hilarious, I guess, when you think about it. On the one hand, Europe has basically said, they've almost kind of stranglehold the businesses and banks in the sense of, we're going to give consumers total control over their data. They are going to know exactly what you're doing with their data. They're going to know exactly who you share that with, and they're going to have total control as to say whether or not you're allowed to do that or not. This is going to require huge investments in order to basically accommodate these requirements. Then on the flip side, you go over here to PSD2, Payment Services Directive, and Europe's basically telling the banks, you have to share now. The one thing that makes banks so much more interesting than anybody else is this relationship they have with their consumers. And suddenly now you've got Europe dictating saying, you've got to share that data. You have to share not only that data, you have to share access to that data and develop systems that allow other third parties, the exact guys that you're competing with, to have access to that data too as well. So when you put these two things together, you can't help but realize that we are going to see some real meaningful digital transformation. So much of transformation that gets talked about today is really more digitalization, right? It's taking existing processes and digitizing them. Find some way to use the internet and the network and mobile apps and the likes to just make things faster, cheaper, and the like. But with these two regulations coming together, this is not just a matter of digitizing what happens today. We are talking about saying, we need to change. We need to transform. It can't be business as usual. The consumer gets total control over their data on one hand, And on the other hand, I have to let that data out of the house and let my competitors have direct access to it. So I think this year, next year, is going to be an outstanding time of transition and transformation. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens overseas. And I think over here in North America, you know, there's a deep desire to say, hey, what happens in Europe stays in Europe. But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in the sense of California is already looking at it saying, hey, I got GDPR light, and wait until they get GDPR heavy is the only suggestion I have there. But the other piece that doesn't make sense is that when you look at the magnitude of investments that all the larger international banks are going to have to make in order to play in Europe, if they've already made that investment to succeed with GDPR, in a GDPR environment and a PSD2 environment, why wouldn't they bring that over here as quickly as possible and leverage the full magnitude of that investment? Once they figure out how to make money and how to thrive in a GDPR environment and a PSD2 environment, it's only natural. It only makes sense to take. No one's going to need to regulate. No one's going to need to force you to bring that over here. You're going to want to bring it over here. It'll be a competitive advantage. It'll make you look more appealing to your customers. So I'm really intrigued by the magnitude, as I said before, of all this change that's taking place. I think we are in for a very fascinating ride, particularly in these next couple of years. And so I thought I'd just end here real quick with maybe a couple of words of advice. The first one, if I find my thing, and that's not it. The first one is, thank you, is learn from the failure of others. Elizabeth mentioned this a little bit. We're doing new things that haven't been done before, and quite frankly, the rules have changed now, so it's a different game. We're playing a different sport altogether. And there's not enough time to sit there and learn on your own and make your own mistakes to some extent. So my strong encouragement here is to learn from the failures of others. Now, the big challenge, I think, with that is that people don't want to talk about their failures, and particularly they don't want to talk about failures with other people in their industry. So my further enhancement to this is learn from the failure of others outside of the industry. You know, you'll hear in so many of these kinds of conferences where, hey, your customer's experience is not being defined by your competitor or by another bank. It's being defined by the Apple, Uber, and Amazons of the world. Well, the failures of people in other industries are also very, very insightful and very, very useful to you too as well. The one that really strikes me is the one that comes from retail most recently, Sears. You know, several years ago, I was such a fan of Sears. I saw a retailer struggling to make the transition to this online Amazon-dominated world. They were throwing all the technology at it. I mean, it was exciting what they were doing. Everything on mobile, buy online, pick up in store, curbside services, even a virtual life-size kitchen remodel or two as well. They had everything, any bit of technology you could imagine. It would have been fine. One of the most defining things on their mobile app was the ability to engage directly with the employee and the associate. So if you found somebody you liked, you had the ability now, while you were at home, to actually give them a call and say, hey, I still have a couple more questions about that TV I was looking at. But the fatal flaw was all that wonderful technology and that probably the most sophisticated digital transformation strategy of anybody. The linchpin was the employee at the back end. You had an employee where if you were buying a dishwasher and an appliance, everybody wanted to talk to you. If you were looking for where the towels were, nobody wanted to talk to you. And there was nobody it was that employee. Technology, you know, that employee was the critical success factor that even with all that technology, you couldn't make up for. And so the failures of others is incredibly insightful. It's incredibly helpful to learn from them. And it's, for the other industries, particularly in retail, far more accessible and far more available to you too as well. The second one that I would strongly encourage you to is to think about taking all these learnings from the failures and develop some kind of model, a simple model of disruption. You need buckets, simple buckets. The fewer blocks, the fewer areas, the better. But you need simple buckets to take all the hundreds and thousands of ideas that you're going to come across here, and as you engage with others, and start to organize your thoughts. The model needs to have as few buckets as possible because it needs to be simple, but it also needs to be comprehensive. You'll see this is one that I've been using and it continues to evolve, but it's comprehensive. There's customer-facing stuff, there's employee-facing stuff. When we think about the branches, that covers basically everything that goes on in a branch. When we think about the cloud and IoT, that basically covers all the new stuff that's basically going to be coming into the branch and basically transforming the customer experience. I throw all the other ones, the network security, the digital infrastructure on there, because these are the success factors. These are the things that can ruin you if you don't do them right. They can ruin you because the market continues to evolve, the threats continue to evolve. Network security, if you get a breach, it's been the end of many retailers' business. It needs to be done right. So much of what I see in banking right now is the closed network approach. Hey, if I don't let anybody in, I'm fine. But in a GDPR world, in a PSD2 world, you don't have that option anymore. The doors are going to get opened up. And if you're going to open up the doors, you need to protect them. And that's a whole new paradigm, a whole new mentality. And so when you look at your internal teams, it's much easier to protect a closed network. When you have to open everything up now, it's a whole new set of expertise that you want to start thinking about and expanding and augmenting in order to deal with this new world. The digital infrastructure, that really speaks to when you think about, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about today, about the video capabilities for training the employees, for video ITMs and engaging with them too as well. That infrastructure that connects your branches to all these wonderful services has been becoming something of a chokehold. It doesn't matter if you have the perfect ITM, because if you have a network that can't support it, it's like that same miserable experience when you're at home and all your kids are on Netflix watching their movies. You can't get anything done. And so you've got to think through the infrastructure, the Wi-Fi, the security, and these kind of elements. The power of having a simple model is not only for you to organize your own internal thoughts, but also for you to communicate with your teams. When we think about what's happening in the industry today, you've got very senior level executives making very technical decisions that they're not very comfortable with. And I think the service here is that we need simple models to make this technology and to make understanding how to make these decisions effectively and competently too as well. And my last thing, because I'm out of time and over time, and Elizabeth is going to come here and yank me off the stage, that I would say to you is that last bit of advice is expand your network. There's so much that we can learn from each other. And so for this last one, I thought I'd just help out some of you with this really cool feature that I discovered a long time ago. But if you're on LinkedIn and you go down to the very bottom of your thing where it has the network icon, where the people are, you touch that. And then if you open up to the Find Nearby on the next screen, you can see everybody who's also done the same thing. And so hopefully, if you were to do that right now, you'll see me. And I invite you to continue the conversation, continue the dialogue. There's so much activity that's going on. Nobody's going to be able to figure this out by themselves. We can help each other as a community get the information, the expertise, and the insight that we need to succeed in this world. Thank you very much. And it's my great pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Jeremy Balkan. He is the Head of Innovations of Retail Banking and Wealth Management at HSBC USA. Thank you.
Trying to hold that thing, I was like, no, can't drop it.
Wow. Good morning, everyone.